Welcome to another edition of the Give Me Liberty podcast of the Standing for Freedom Center at Liberty University, where we defend life, liberty, and truth to ensure the foundations of freedom exist for the next generation. I am joined by a very special guest, honored to be joined by somebody who is bold in defending the faith, defending children, and a bold detransitioner, somebody who has taken her story very public, and that is Chloe Cole. Chloe, welcome. It is great to see you.
Thank you for having me.
I got to meet you a few months ago, actually, at CPAC, interestingly enough, in Washington, D.C. at their annual meeting. And it is so good to see you again. One of the reasons I wanted to have you on is just because of all of the things that have taken place, that have transpired over the past 100 days with the new Trump administration. Certainly a lot of bold leadership, a lot of peeling back on the DEI wokeness, that whole entire narrative. Certainly when it comes to the trans issue, Trump has been very upfront, very bold in his actions. Department of Health and Human Services released a comprehensive review of best practices for children and teens with gender dysphoria. And basically this report highlighted that there were serious risks associated with gender treatments for kids especially. And those are things like infertility, sexual dysfunction, cardiovascular disease, and all those types of things. I wanted to get your reaction. I don't know if you had a chance to look at that report, but certainly you've watched what has transpired with the Trump administration. How do you take all this in? Just your thoughts from where we were a year ago to where we are now.
I mean, as somebody who's gone through what I have, it's kind of vindicating. I've known from my own personal experiences and from connecting with many other people in my situation that just how dangerous, just how damaging these treatments are, not just for adults, but also for children, for people who are developing. And to see that finally being recognized on a national level, it's something that I've been waiting for years. I mean, the U.S. has been far behind on this issue, whereas Europe has been conducting reviews on this with the CAS review in the UK, and with, I think, Sweden and Finland conducting their own systematic reviews on these treatments for use in children. We should have been the first in line to really just assess what we're actually doing to our young patients in this country.
Yeah, it's truly remarkable. You learned by walking this journey yourself. You've come on our show. You've shared a little bit about this in the past. What I guess when it comes to there's the transition process and identifying. So there is a process in which doctors are taking young patients through in order to undergo this sort of medical transition, but then the detransition process. Walk us through what that kind of looks like, because you went through this. And I think for some people, it's like there is no, I mean, in the ultimate sense, there's healing that the Lord provides, healing of our souls, our psyche, kind of our mental health. He can heal us there. But there are certainly scars, bodily scars that can never ultimately be repaired. But you had to face this. So tell us a little bit about that.
So, I mean, the initial transition process was actually very straightforward with my doctors and with going through the clinics and the referral process. The moment that I mentioned gender and therapy, it was like the entire focus of my clinicians and of my psychologists, to make sure I felt affirmed and get me to the next step and essentially get me what I wanted rather than what I think I really had needed.
Yeah.
Which would have been a lot more comprehensive assessments of my mental health and where the feelings really came from for me at the time. No, it was just treated as a fact that, yes, I was a young man and I was going to go through the process without much questioning. So I began medically transitioning at 13 with the usage of Lupron to suppress my puberty, which Lupron has been the subject of lawsuits for its previous uses in patients who have endometriosis, who have reproductive cancers, endocrine conditions. It's also been used as a chemical castration agent in sex offenders. And this was something that was being administered to me as a perfectly healthy child who had nothing wrong with her body at all. And alongside that, I was put on testosterone to masculinize my body, my face, my voice. And at 15 years old, I had underwent a radical double mastectomy to surgically remove my breasts as part of the cosmetic masculinization process. Um, and as you know, I ended up detransitioning at 16, but
Mm.
detransitioning proved to be much more difficult than the transition itself because within the medical community, within these hospital systems, um, and the standards of care, there's no acknowledgement of what happens when you come out the other side,
Mm.
or even the possibility of detransition. I didn't know that it was a thing, that there was even a word for it until after it had happened to me, until after I chose to stop transitioning. So my doctors had absolutely no clue what to do with me once I started experiencing the regrets, once I started grieving over my breasts and those lost formative years, um, and over the more feminine parts of my body. And when I needed help with some of the complications that I was experiencing, which um, some of which were unfortunately very on par with what a lot of transitioning children experience. But I also had some unique complications having to do with the skin grafts that they used in my surgery becoming open wounds for about a year. I had pelvic floor issues. I had literal blood clots in my urine, and my doctors ended up turning the other cheek. I think because they didn't want to shoulder the responsibility or because they just didn't know how they could help me at all.
Yeah.
And as the patient, I basically had to figure out the entire process of socially, psychologically, and medically detransitioning on my own. And there's still so many unknowns for me because we don't have any long-term studies on not only what these treatments actually do to the body and their health risks, but also what they do to children in the long term. I haven't been to a doctor who's been able to answer me yet what the future of my health might look like. I don't
Mm.
know whether I'm going to be able to conceive children of my own now that I'm an adult.
Mm.
Um, and what some of the risk of pregnancy might be for me, if there's any risk of birth defects for my children, or if I'm at heightened risk for reproductive cancers. There's just so many things that can't be answered to right now. And that's why this review by the HHS that's actually one of the conclusions that came from it. We don't have enough evidence to support the use of these treatments in children, but we need more studies
Yeah.
on what these treatments will actually do to a developing mind and body.
Yes. You know, it's interesting. You do cite Europe, what's happening there. There was a CAS review in the United Kingdom. Basically, that led to the closure of pediatric gender care in these clinics across the UK. So they have been out in front on this whole gender affirming movement in terms of repealing and pulling back what was taking place. I know many years. Well, it's probably more than 5 years ago now. Johns Hopkins Research Hospital had made a similar claim, but politically, that wasn't correct in the moment. Politically, that gender affirming care essentially had no benefit, no evidence of benefit in patients, people that were experiencing gender dysphoria, and that was in adults. And so, yet they're conducting these medical experiments, treating live human beings created in the image of God, young women, young girls, young boys, treating them like guinea pigs. This is doing experimental treatments, as you say. We don't know what the long-term impact of those treatments might be. I do applaud your boldness because, I mean, so many people, Chloe, would not be able to go and articulate as you have what you underwent. And so I just applaud that courage, and I thank you for that. And certainly you're a champion and a hero for truth. What would you say though? I mean, there might be there's certainly there's more work to be done on this front. In spite of what all that we know even now, it appears as though they're doubling down, like in the state of Colorado and in California and other places, doubling, tripling down on this woke gender confusion nonsense. So what would be your message? I mean, obviously, we haven't stopped fighting. It seems like this fight has only just begun.
Absolutely. We have a lot more work on the ground that we need to do in the next 4 years if we want to ensure not only the future of our country, but also the safety of our children. I don't believe that any child in the United States is going to be safe until this practice is completely eradicated from all 50 states and federally. And it's going to be a major uphill battle, but it's not impossible. And I really believe that we can, and we very possibly will, make this into a country where children are no longer being systematically abused under the guise of gender affirming care. As a Californian, it's incredibly disappointing to see just how far forward they're going in the opposite direction of ensuring that this practice remains in our state, that children can run away from their parents and seek this, that they can be ripped apart from their families. And even children from out of state can come to California, run away from their parents, and have parents' rights just be completely ignored. This happened to me here. And I believe, California gets kind of a bad rap amongst a lot of conservatives for many often good reasons, but I'm a Californian at heart.
Yeah.
And our state, it's such a beautiful state, and it deserves to be fought for.
Since 1971, Liberty University has had one mission: training champions for Christ. We've been at this for a while, and in the shadow of the Blue Ridge Mountains, we have grown to be a global force. Today, Liberty runs over 100,000 students around the globe, studying across 15 colleges and schools.
And, among them, over 30,000 military students.
Across 700 programs of study, we train as one: nurses, artists, business leaders of the future and today. Together, we work to give back through service trips, local community work, and over 500,000 volunteer hours per year. And we play just as hard as we study, with 20 NCAA athletic programs and 40 club sports teams. So, who are we? We are Liberty University, and we train champions for Christ.
Yeah, I by the way, I wholeheartedly agree. I love the beauty and the wonder of California. When we get to go out there, I am always sort of aghast at just how you have these beautiful beaches, beautiful mountains. You have an incredible people that are there, and yet, and I putting this through a gospel lens and through a biblical worldview. That this is a harvest field. This is a people that need to be reached for the gospel of Jesus Christ. And part of the reason why there's so much political nonsense upheaval, the world turned upside down, and it needs to be set to rights. But it's a spiritual darkness, and we need bold men and women who are unapologetic about the gospel, not to abandon it, but to press in. And so I think there are many people called to the great state of California to plant churches, to send missionaries, to go into public schools, to rescue kids, to do exactly what you're doing. And that is the front lines in which you need to advocate, specifically for men and women who are created in God's image, and they are absolutely perfect in the way that God has made them. Male and
Absolutely.
female. Yeah.
And I hate to say it, and it wasn't just like this a few decades ago, but I think that California has become a very spiritually weak place. And many people who live here are seeking to move out and run away from it. No. If we want to solve the problem, that starts with us. I think where California goes, the rest of the country often tends to follow. If we want to nip it in the bud, we have to fight on our own territory, and make sure that its beauty is preserved,
Hmm.
and that it becomes a safe and sane place again. And that goes for the rest of our country. It's up to us to ensure that the sacrifices that our founding fathers, that our forefathers who fought for our rights and our legacy, that we are worthy of that, and that future generations will have that preserved for them.
Talk a little bit about, in terms of the moment, I think, you recognized that you wanted, you knew something was wrong. You wanted it to detransition. Spiritually speaking, you found comfort and hope in the gospel of Jesus Christ. And I think that's really important. Your spiritual journey, your struggle, but ultimately that led you to the gospel and ultimately changed your life. It started spiritually, but then it manifested physically. Tell us a little bit about that.
So I think that the transition itself was a sort of spiritual trap that came from um, a lack of a spiritual foundation in my life. For most of my formative years, I was an atheist or agnostic, and my mom and dad didn't really raise me with those Christian values or beliefs. But because of that, I think, I mean, they didn't want to push me into any particular um, set of beliefs, and they wanted to allow me to form my own beliefs and values going to adulthood. But in doing so, it created this sort of this vacuum, this hole that I had, that partly led to my confusion around my identity, which ended up manifesting into the transition. But when I came back out of the transition, um, I had to find something else. Now, what led me to detransition was, I mean, I think the surgery was a major turning point in my life and in the transition itself, where my attitude just completely changed because it was such a radical thing to undertake.
Hmm.
Um, my, I mean, physically, it was hell. Like I had to every day, every day I had to look down at this area of my chest that was now bare, that just had scars where my breasts used to be. Um, and contend with the fact that I had lost entire organs off of my body, and I now had to take care of them and take care of the wounds and everything, to bandage them, to carefully to take very to take a lot of care of them. But also like the mental fallout of that was just incredible. And very soon afterward, I realized that there were a lot of things that I missed about my life as a young woman, socially and emotionally. Um, and that I actually was quite feminine, and I loved things like dresses. I loved, feeling like I was cute and pretty and being able to do my hair and doll myself up, just a lot of the little things, but also the big things about being a woman.
Mm.
Um, and I was at a point in time where, I was 15 going on 16 when I
Yeah.
had surgery. And I had to it started to hit me then, like, I'm gonna be an adult soon. I'm gonna have to think about, like, my future, where I'm gonna go to college, if I wanna go to school or not after high school. And I never had a first kiss before, but I wondered all the time, like, when I had my first relationship, what's that gonna be like? What's
Mm.
the older I got, the more I started to think about, like, the dynamics of it. Like, what's the dynamic gonna be? Like, I'm still attracted to men, but I'm playing this role as a man. And if I wanna get married and have children, what's that going to look like? Because 'Cause I'm on these drugs that, um, may have prevented me from being able to fully develop enough to conceive children of my own. But
Hmm.
wait a minute, so what if I wanna have kids?
Mm.
What if I want to have children? I feel now that it might have a responsibility even to have biological children. And in my junior year of high school, I was taking a developmental psychology class, and I got to learn about how children develop from infancy up until 18 years of age, and how parenting plays a role in that, things like attachment styles. Um, and I started to learn a little bit about myself and about my own childhood through this class. And I figured out that I had attachment issues with my own mom and dad, and that because of some of my problems in my relationship with them personally, that ended up manifesting in a difficulty socializing, which ended up becoming issues with my identity. And it was like I had this epiphany that my issues with my identity weren't because of my sex. It wasn't because of me being a woman.
Mm.
It wasn't because I was a man in a woman's body. It was because of these foundational issues in my childhood. I
Mm.
never was a young man. And it really, as I was reading about children, getting to learn about them in an in-depth way that I hadn't before, because I'm the youngest of 5 kids. I never had to like help babysit or anything, or like really help like rear a child for another person. Like, it was my first glimpse in how beautiful innocence is, and the fact that this is something that I would want to experience on my own one day. I would want to have kids and have that experience for myself. And it was just so heartbreaking having all of these realizations at once, that I never was a young man, that this wasn't who I was, that my identity issues were not what I thought they were, and that I could have had something ripped away from me, something very important adulthood ripped away from me while I still very much was a child.
Mm.
And that was when the nail in the coffin had been hit, and I knew I'm not transgender. Nobody is transgender. I never had to do this in the first place, but I've been harmed because these adults in my life, these doctors who were supposed to help me and my parents, just weren't competent.
It's incredible to think, and what you're articulating in that spiritual journey, and it's a journey through life that a lot of people undergo. A lot of people, most people, when they're a child, they think like children do. And I'm going to put on this costume. I'm going to pretend to be this. I'm going to pretend to be a cowboy. I'm going to pretend to be an astronaut. I'm going to pretend to be Batman or whatever it might be. Kids do this. They play. And a lot of times it's lackadaisical. There's no rhyme or reason to it. It's just a child playing and imagining. And children can then have all kinds of fixations and obsessions. I have 4 kids now, but 3 of my kids have gone through that early childhood development where they have various fixations and phases that they go through. And me as an adult, as a parent, it's part of my responsibility to them and before God to lead and guide and shepherd them in their innocence. And I don't mean moral innocence, because we're all sinners before God, but in their innocence of not understanding and not having the wisdom and the wherewithal. And so you have to lead, guide, and direct them. You have to teach them how to bathe and how to eat and how to sleep and all of those things, right? Well, there were adults in your life, and there were doctors, people who knew better, and understanding where you've gone to where you are now. You were a child, but being treated like an adult. And, having the wherewithal, the capacity to make these decisions. Yet there are adults who are in the room, and they have evaded any kind of moral responsibility. They've turned a blind eye, as you were saying earlier, to what was happening. Why do you think, what is the motivation for this? I mean, there's a spiritual reason, but do you think that there's financial incentives for this as well? Do you think it's profiteering? What is it that's causing them to say, we're just going to do what this client or patient is saying. We're not going to go through this process because it's difficult of maybe confronting these delusions.
I think you're absolutely right about it being a form of play for these children. It's just, children learn about the world through playing as another, and it gives them a glimpse into the role of, what it's like to be maybe something that they want to be, or when they're growing up, or in this case, how the opposite sex operates. I think in a way, it's sort of it's an empathetic thing that children tend to do, and especially for children who might be on the autism spectrum, or have some form of learning disability, or maybe a little bit more developmentally stunted in some way. You're bound to see this kind of play more often, especially later in their childhoods or even like going into adulthood. And it's no surprise that a lot of the patients who get sucked into this, both the children and the young adults, are people who are on the spectrum, who are autistic or have some other cognitive developmental abnormality, which is why, I mean, it's so heinous for these clinicians who are trained to see these patterns of behavior, um, to just look at it as if they're fully grown adults who are in the state of mind to be able to make permanent lifelong decisions like this. Um, and I believe that these clinicians, these psychologists, I mean, for a lot of, there are some who may generally be in it just for the sake of the money that it makes for them, and this is something that is very highly profitable, particularly the surgeries. Um, but I think it's more so a matter of ideological capture. These people are so genuinely deluded. They really believe that by administering these treatments to their patients, by chopping off or changing parts of their body surgically, and by leading them down this lifelong path of medicalization, that they're actually doing their patients and their families a favor.
Mm.
I mean, as adults, it's our responsibility not to get sucked into delusion.
Yeah.
They have abdicated themselves of basic personal responsibilities by doing so.
So you're looking for a university that's perfect for you, a school that has anything you could possibly need.
Anything?
You want a place that has the programs you want to study, and maybe a few more just in case you change your mind.
I think I'm going to sign up for the fashion design program.
All right. A place with state-of-the-art facilities. I mean, look at this campus.
And who doesn't love big-time sports?
And great recreational activities!
Okay, now we're on a roll. Somewhere you can hike, slide, strike, shoot, climb, eat, and most importantly, eat. You want a place that takes you to space? Okay, maybe not, but we can teach you how to fly, or pastor a church, or run a business. And all that with a great view? Yeah, I think I know a place.
You know, I'm reminded of the founding of Planned Parenthood, Margaret Sanger, who, in addition to, sort of creating this industrial complex of mass producing abortion across the country, going into certain cities, ghettos, that kind of thing. She was a moral philosopher. She was a naturalist, a humanist. She was definitely anti-religion. Ideologically, she had a bent. It wasn't merely about providing a service of abortion. It wasn't merely about, creating an industry in which women had the right to choose, so to speak. But it really was about something else. She was leading a kind of movement, and a emancipation kind of movement where women could not only be free from their proper roles, in terms of the role of the home, marriage, having those obligation for children, all of that, but then ultimately emancipated from the God who made them female. When you look at the writings, the various speeches that she gave throughout her lifetime, it was very clear that this was something that went beyond merely choice. This was something darker. There was a real plot, if you will, to usher in a movement that would fundamentally transform society. And what's kind of interesting is there's a parallel between that and I think the trans movement. In all of these movements, Chloe, I think there are common fools, those people that go along, right? I've been a fool who has gone along with certain ideas, not really recognizing the dangers that are there. But then I think that there's also this category where it's truly the wicked. And the wicked have schemes and they have plans, and it goes beyond what other people can see. It goes beyond merely, well, this is just us, it's a one-to-one correlation. This is just about, you know, changing your body into who you ultimately feel in your spirit that you are. Or, this is about, taking these hormone treatments and then this will fix that or tweak that. There's something more deviant, something that is darker there. And I think spiritually, when we come to faith in Christ, we recognize that darkness for what it is. We didn't see it before, but we see it now. Is that something you can relate to?
I think absolutely. This is so much more than a battle around politics and ideology. This is something that goes incredibly deep. This is a spiritual battle. And I don't think initially, I think that this initially started as really a series of mad science experiments in the last century. And it became a movement to subvert reality and God's design itself. It's ignoring the basic reality of male and female, the image in which we were created by God. And it's tearing apart our institutions. It's tearing apart our families, the basic building block of society, and it targets children and our most vulnerable. I don't think that this is one of the few instances in history, I think, where the line between good and evil has been so clear.
Mm.
And it's all under the guise of gender-affirming care, of helping a supposedly marginalized group of people who can't help but to be transgender. That this is an innate thing for them, and that by trying to protect them, we're actually ripping away their health care away from them, their basic fundamental human rights. No. By doing this to children, I mean, I think that in it has become almost a eugenicist movement in the same way that the Margaret Sanger's movement began. Even if it didn't begin with those same intentions, this is something that primarily affects people who experience severe mental health issues, who are depressed, who have severe trauma, either relating to their family or having been sexually abused. Many of these people have learning disabilities, and it's sterilizing those groups of people in our population. And it's ripping our families. It's ignoring the rights of sane parents who love their children, who know the authority of their children, away from them. Taking children away from their loving families.
Yeah. Amen to that. In terms of recognizing the reality, the darkness for what it is, there is always hope. We are seeing a shift in this country, certainly from an administrative policy-making standpoint. The tide is turning back, but also in places like where you're in one of the darkest places. It's trench warfare. There is a feeling of optimism. There is still work to do. The vibe shift, I think, is real. But are you optimistic about the future, about the prospects of winning this battle?
I am very cautiously optimistic. I think it really depends on how hard we all work towards this. Just a few years ago, I thought like maybe it'll be impossible to get any changes on any federal level on this issue. But we've seen just within the first 100 days of the administration, all the executive orders that have gone out. And with the release of this systematic review by the HHS, I'm really hoping that it will really get the ball rolling, not only in the clinical sphere, but also potentially setting us up for federal legislation that will protect our future generations of children from this abuse.
Well, I am prayerful to that end that we can effectively eradicate this gender ideology once and for all, and certainly end this malicious practice and pernicious evil that has been foisted upon our children in the name of gender-affirming care. We need to end that. And certainly, as you said, and you began by saying the word, and I think God is the ultimate vindicator. That ultimately, when truth reflects Him and His glory, He is the vindicator. And He's the vindicator of the righteous. And I think you have been vindicated But I do still believe there is justice that still needs to be administered. Justice that's not administered in this lifetime will be administered in life to come. We're assured of that from the scriptures. But there are people who do face responsibility and consequences. The adults in the room who need to take morals responsibility because they're culpable. And I think that there is a future for them as well, a future day. They have a rendezvous with justice.
And I think that that ultimate justice will be achieved by God. But while we're on this earth now, we need to hold these adults who are abusing our children and our young people accountable. And I think one of the best ways that we can not only hold them accountable, but also stop this abuse from happening in our country is through lawsuits. We need to hold these people accountable, hold them by their wallets, and scare them out of even thinking about doing this to any other young patient ever again.
Yep, I wholeheartedly agree. We'll take the law. Certainly heard him in the pocketbook, and I think that too will be a warning against anybody in the future who might try to come against children. Chloe, thank you so much for your boldness. Thank you so much for your transparency, your authenticity, sharing your story, being vulnerable with us and with this audience. I really appreciate you coming on the Give Me Liberty podcast, and we are cheering you on. Where can we find you, by the way?
So I am primarily on X and Instagram at CHOOOCOLE. That's 3 O's. Or you can just look me up by looking up Chloe Cole. And I'm also on YouTube as well. I am doing an interview series of other detransitioners to highlight their stories. And I also have been doing college tour for a few years now, going across different campuses with groups like YAF and Turning Point to give my story to the younger generation. And you never know, I might show up in your own community. So if I'm ever local, I'd appreciate if you showed up.
Awesome. Chloe, thank you. God bless you. Thank you for joining the Give Me Liberty podcast.
Thank you so much.
Hey, did you find this helpful? I hope you did. Please like and subscribe, share with a friend, and also go to standingforfreedom.com where you can find more content, articles, podcasts, and our Theology of Politics series, all at standingforfreedom.com.